Dear Uncle Yokai, I've been seeking to improve my abilities on the Goat Simulator Heist, performed on the highest difficulty known as Death Sentence / One Down. Anytime this heist would be performed, featuring me, the heist will not be completed, considering unknown reasons. I sincerely hope that an individual like you would be willing to guide us to victory. A victory that will make my allies, other brave people, and me trying to finish this heist will finally be able to rest. Best regards, Miguel.Pablo2009. I don't know, just get good finally. Maybe you should occasionally press mouse 1 to kill cops. I did it. Maybe use cover as well or something, I don't know, you tell me. But honestly, the beginning here was a bit exaggerated, but there are quite a few people who ask me on how to get better on certain heists, like Goat Simulator, or better in general on Death Sentence. Today won't be about Death Sentence, I might save that for another day, but today's focus will be on goats. Whenever I play a public Goat Simulator, regardless what difficulty, people always tend to do the same mistake and decide to rush doing assaults and get completely obliterated trying to finish it. With this video here, I want to try to help some of you people out that do not know a proper strategy to beat this particular heist. So I guess let's begin, shall we? Starting off on day 1. Here you have to collect goats that are spread all around the map and then secure them in this huge truck. There are 15 goats total on the main difficulty or above. They all spawn randomly across the map. Now, how do you approach this heist? Where do you start with the goats? Well, obviously enough, you will choose the Leech perk deck, grab yourself Swansong, Fine Death, and Messiah Ace. And while you're at it, get yourself Carry Stacker as well, and remove the nerf on it, so that you can carry all 15 goats, and still be able to sprint, and then secure all goats at once, because there's no other way to beat this heist. Let's be real here. No, but seriously, there are up to 15 goats on this map, starting from the main difficulty up to the Death Sentence difficulty. Most of the goats just lie somewhere on the ground. These are the free roaming goats that you can just pick up. They are spread across 13 different spots, and if you were to look at this map here, you can see where they can actually spawn. The blue dots are these free roaming goats. Furthermore, the free roaming goats sometimes actually stand up, which can be quite dangerous because these rascals actually kick you in the nuts, which can result into dying. I'm not a doctor or anything, but I'm pretty sure dying isn't healthy. So watch out for these goats, I guess. I usually just pick them up immediately whenever I need to hide out near them, so that I won't get obliterated by the goats. Now onto some more unique goats. There is one goat that can spawn in 3 different stores across the map. One here near the Captain's Winter spawn. Another one right here down below the park or underneath the fire apartment. And another one right here next to the scaffolding. When you find a goat inside the stores, there is a chance it's either somehow stuck on the ceiling fan, then you need to hack the right power box out of 4 different ones near that store, or that goat can be stuck behind security shutters, meaning you need to drill the barrier open. Once you open the barrier and hack the power boxes, you can just pick up the goat. This can apply to any of the 3 stores, assuming a goat is inside. Another goat can get stuck on the lamppost. To free it, you just have to saw down the lamppost, and then secure the goat. Nothing too special here. Remember the scaffolding I mentioned before? Well, a goat can spawn on it as well. It is electrocuted, so you can't just climb it. If you want to climb it, you need to interact again with the right power box near the scaffolding, similar to the store power boxes that I talked about before. Once you turn off the power, you can retrieve the goat. There is a zipline here on the scaffolding, but when it comes to Death Sentence, you really should just throw the goat downstairs and move carefully back the way you came up. Just don't be like me and fall off the scaffolding. The main reason why you don't want to use the zipline is because it leads you to an open area, which isn't an ideal spot to be in on the Death Sentence difficulty. You don't really save that much time anyway over the normal path back to the ground, so you really should just avoid the zipline. And last but not least, Another goat will spawn in this fire apartment. Once you are inside, there is a waypoint to this goat, so finding the right path isn't any difficult. You just have to turn on sprinklers, get rid of the fire, and remove some debris. Watch out though, there are some scripted spawns, like this dozer here in this apartment, whenever you progress. Now, when you get the goat, there's also a zipline like on the scaffolding, but as you can probably already expect, you should just avoid it and move back down the same way you went up there in the first place. Now, if you were to look at this map, which seems a bit confusing at first, this will be our guide here. A good indicator to help you to understand this map is to basically think as this spot down here, where a goat can spawn, is also the Captain Winter spawn. You know, the guy that hides behind way too many shields. It makes the game a lot harder, since it gives the cops a times 1.5 damage resistance. Well anyway, this right here is the fire apartment, where there's always one goat hanging out of the window. I think that should help giving you an idea on how this map looks like. Now, ideally, you want to do this heist with 4 people, since it is the easiest way to beat it, assuming you and those other 3 people have at least some sort of knowledge on how to play Death Sentence. If you were to play this solo, with AI or without AI, this strategy works just as fine. But alright, you want to start by going for the car and drive over to this corner of the map. This corner where the big red circle is by far the hardest area to hold out. Never stay here doing assaults. Only go there at the start of the map or doing fades. If you don't know what a fade is, it is basically the time in between assaults, just in case you didn't know that. Now, you want to grab the goats that you can't just easily pick up. If you get a goat that is on the scaffolding, like I got it here, just ignore it and come back to it later doing a fade. I'm aware that you might be able to get this goat alone or with the help of another player, but I usually tend to ignore it anyway. It doesn't really matter, to be honest. The same applies to the goat that is in this store here, where you need to drill the gates. Or when the goat is on the fan, where you also need to hack the same electrical boxes. Just ignore it and come back to it at a fade. Now, once you have this area cleared, you want to drive down here and get these goats. Once you got all goats fit into the car, you want to drive over here and just let the car stay there until the truck arrives and move the goats during fade. Now, while that one guy is getting all of these goats, there should be another player going for these goats right here that are marked in yellow. These goats are basically all the ones in the park, and the one right here behind the pillars, and the one at this crossroad right here. Then you put all of the goats right here in the alleyway, next to the fire apartment. You just throw all of the goats on the ground here. If you have a third player, you should be going for all of the goats marked in the green color over here. Grab the goat that can spawn at the Captain Winter spawn location first, since it is more difficult to get. Throw it in the direction of the park, and then grab the goat that can spawn up here, and the one inside of the store. However, if there is a barrier in front of the store, just ignore it, similar to the scaffolding I talked about earlier. Just place a drill on it, and come back to it during a fade. If you get these electrical boxes, it's the same thing, just wait another fade, and then get the goat. Once you get the goats from the ground, you just put them here in the same alleyway, of course, and just hide out there. Now for the fourth player, assuming you have one. This one is pretty vague to explain, since this person can essentially support anyone else that is trying to get goats, mainly the player going for the car, to help him out getting goats like on the scaffolding, since with 2 players this can be done relatively quick. The goats that I did mark here are goats that can be secured pretty easily during assaults as well. They are really not a big deal to get. This also goes for the goat that can't spawn on this lamppost. However, if your team is struggling to play this heist to some extent, you can always go for the safer strategy here and retrieve this goat during fades. This heist really is all about fast movement and waiting for fades. Lots of fades. But nothing more than that really. Now with that done, this is essentially the entire day 1 strategy. To recap pretty quickly, you basically get all of the harder goats first, before the first assault even starts. You put them all in a safe location where you can hold out, that being in the alleyway next to the fire apartment. You get more goats during fades or secure your current goats during fades at the truck here. Never ever go into open field at assaults, only during fades. This is essentially the safest strategy to approach this day. This strategy also works extremely well in solo, both with Team AI or without Team AI. I have proven that in the past as well, since I have a couple of solos on this heist using this very same strategy. I will link these solos in the description, so you can check it out yourself in greater detail. Another thing I just want to add is that you don't have to exactly copy this layout as I shown it here. If you approach this heist slightly different, as in you getting other goats first or in a different order, that's totally fine. What you want to do though, is to get as many goats as possible, especially harder ones, before the assault even starts. But really, once you've figured out the strategy on day 1, it really isn't any difficult, honestly. Now that we have talked about getting the goats and hold out in this alleyway for the entire heist, how do you actually secure the goats and which RNG is the best for it? Well, looking back at this map, it also shows us the truck spawn locations, marked as these blue boxes. There are 3 of them. 2 of these spawns are the better ones. I can't really tell which is the better between them, but they're pretty much equally good. These 2 spawns being the one next to the Captain Winters and the one on this side near the fire apartment. The 3rd spawn is by far the worst, since it is in this corner I talked about earlier. This corner being the worst one to hold out. Sometimes when I play this heist and I get bad people in my lobby, I tend to restart here and hope for a different spawn truck RNG. I will give reasons to that in a moment, but first let's talk about the 2 other spawns. You see, when the truck spawns on either the Captain Winters side or near the fire apartment, you can use the car to move the goats pretty easily during fades, but also your legs, and be totally fine with it. This is because both truck spawns are pretty close to the safe location where you are holding out for the entire heist. Given the fades are really scuffed in this game, you really do not have that much time moving goats, so you mostly are able to move up to like 8 goats per fade, with a decent team at least. But that's more than enough really, even if it's like only like 4 goats per fade. Now I think I actually haven't talked about where to exactly put the goats when you hold out. I usually tend to leave them right here in this area. It is a decent spot, because when you get the truck spawn at the Captain Winters, you're able to move your goats pretty quickly, since the way you have to move the goats is quite short. If you get the truck on the other side, I highly recommend to move all of your goats somewhere near this fire apartment. Once it is fade, you just secure the goats in the truck. Now the problem with the 3rd truck spawn at this corner of the map is that you can only really use the car to secure the goats. The car can only hold 4 goats, so securing all 15 goats like this will take some time. And it is quite risky too, since you are far away from your team. On top of that, you have to move a pretty big distance, which, you know, takes time, and you don't have much time during fades anyway. Meaning once you want to drive back to your team, it is most likely another assault already. So this is kind of why I tend to restart whenever I get this RNG. I recommend you to do the same when you get this RNG. I'm not saying you have to restart when you get this RNG, but trust me, it can be worth it. Now there isn't much to talk about spawns. There will be a bigger issue on day 2, but here on day 1 it is sort of alright, since the cop spawns are pretty far away from where you hold out. There are only like a couple of spawns near the trucks. Just watch out for them I guess and you should be fine. The major thing you will have to watch out though are snipers. Whenever you peek near the main roads, always check for snipers on the buildings. They also can sometimes spawn in helicopters. I think this footage gives you some idea on where they can spawn. You should really just check every rooftop for snipers every time you want to move out in the open area. Another thing that I want to mention is the Captain Winters himself. I highly suggest to have one player in the lobby using a sniper build, because with a sniper you can easily kill him from this position. There's no need to go up close to him. And that covers pretty much everything on day 1 I think. As I said before, I do have some solos on this heist using this same strategy. In case I did miss something that you want to know about, then I highly suggest to check out these solos, since they might help you out with some part of the map. Well anyways, let's move up to day 2 of Goat Simulator. Here on day 2, it is much less about strategy, but more about shooting cops. So bringing a build that has a quite decent amount of damage output surely isn't wrong here. Now, upon masking up, the first thing you want to do is move all of the goats back here, where we are throwing them right now. Do not throw them upstairs, throw them downstairs. This is simply because they are much easier to defend from the cops when they are downstairs, since your hiding spot for the most of the time will be in this area as well. The first 2 minutes will be spent by getting rushed by gangsters. The cops spawn sometime later on, so watch out for that, I guess. Health-based decks tend to struggle here at first, since these gangsters also do quite a decent amount of damage. Now, you also should barricade some windows using these planks. I highly recommend getting this one window in particular, since this one window is in the area where you're going to hold out. Not boarding up the other windows is fine as well, to be honest, but it is also not wrong when you do board them up. It is just that it doesn't really change that much. Anyways, some minutes later on, the pallet will drop a cage for you to assemble. This cage will be used to put in all 15 goats, and it will be then secured by the same pallet again. Once you raise the balloon, it takes the pallet around 2 minutes to come back and grab it the first time. If he misses it, he will come back later. It takes a bit more than a minute for the second attempt. However, on the second attempt, he will always grab it, and every other attempt afterwards as well. So if you were to do a somewhat miserable run, every cage pickup after the second attempt will have a chance of 100% being collected. When he drops the cage on one out of 3 different spots, which is this field right here at the hay bales, or the silo I guess, the area near the bridge, and also here at the road. The cage assembly cannot be at the same spot where he dropped the cage itself. Here's an image drawn by one of my top artwork creators. It is a pretty good, high detailed map, isn't it? You can tell there's lots of effort put into it. Now let's say the cage drop is on the bridge right here. Then it would mean the cage assembly will be either on the road or the silo. And you know, if the cage drop would be on the silo, the assembler will either be on the bridge or the road. You get the point. Now furthermore, here's also a rough showcase of where you should be moving once you grab the cage at each spot. Most of these paths involve you throwing the cage into the barn and then continue to move from there. If it is not obvious enough, you of course should be getting the cage during fades and not during assaults. Play it carefully and move slowly. Now that we talked about where the cage drops and where you can assemble it, how do you actually approach the assembly? I will go over each assembly location here, starting with the best assembly. The best as in being the easiest one to complete, which is this silo assembly, considering you get the most cover out of this location. This is the RNG that you want to have. Now you want to start with putting down the cage first, and then start moving all goats in there. As I said before, when you raise the balloon, it takes around 2 minutes for the pallet to arrive, to pick it up again. You can sort of abuse this by putting in just a few goats first, and then raise the balloon early. It can be quite risky, so be sure that you can put all goats in there in time. But if done correctly, you can save quite a decent amount of time. Another thing you want to watch out are the cop spawns. They are actually quite a big problem on this day, since they are close to your objectives, unlike on day 1. Here on the silo, they can spawn from this hill, they will also come up from here, from the river, and also from the barn side. To counter this, you ideally want to have 1 or 2 people in the barn defending that area, and 2 other people down here next to the hay bales. One guy is watching the spawn from the hill, and another one from the river. Now keep in mind that I said ideally. You can still do this with less people, / just running around doing whatever, and not doing the strategy down to the wire, as I just shown it here. This is again because this RNG has plenty of cover to provide, and is pretty easy to defend. If you get the road assembly, the first thing you want to do is throw your goats towards the cops, and let them steal the goats. that sounds pretty scuffed, but trust me, it is a very good strategy. You see, when the cops grab the goats, they will always carry it right here at the road, which conveniently is right next to the road assembly. So move the cage during fades, and also get the goats during fades into the cage. If it is not obvious enough, you should only throw the goats towards the cops, and let them grab the goats. Once you picked up the cage drop, and you can verify that the assembly is indeed at the road. Otherwise, this move is kind of not great. I mean, unless you were to use RNG modifier at your desired settings, but we don't do that here at the Uncle Gelgal YouTube channel. Okay, where the fuck was I again? Now the harder part will be trying to hold out in this area, doing assaults, since it is somewhat of an open field. You see, the cops can spawn from 2 spots around here. Watch out for these, because whenever they spawn, they are usually hidden behind bushes and whatnot, and they will still shoot you through the bushes. As you can probably expect, this is gonna lead into some very unfair situations. So again, be really careful and watch out for these 2 spots in particular. Now to sort of clarify, the recommended holding spot at the far left is behind the red car right here. I feel like I had to mention this, because you can't really see it well in the picture. Furthermore, when staying at the truck, be sure you don't get shot from underneath the truck. And also, watch out again for the cop spawns behind you, up here on this hill behind the bushes. Now all of this combined still isn't that much of a problem compared to the bridge assembly. The bridge assembly is the worst RNG you can get. When you get it, you might as well just restart and hope for better RNG. But I will still explain how you do it. So first of all, you want to move the cage to the inside of the barn and then throw it outside from this window. This is because you get a good distance, clear it without any issues. Also, the cops cannot steal any of the cage bags. So when it is fade, you go assemble the cage, and if the fade is good enough, you might as well also start to move the goats. Now this is the part that is the most difficult, because the cops can spawn from the silo area that I talked about before, and these cops can actually also interrupt you with relative ease. Meaning they will shoot you from basically anywhere around here, giving you essentially no cover when moving the goats. However, here in the footage we at least got a pretty good team going on, and some decent fade, so we managed to get this done quite well actually. But as soon as your team is like slightly worse, this RNG is gonna give you some massive issues. It really does. Just make sure when you throw the goats outside, you don't have the cops around, because they will grab the goats incredibly fast, and it's super hard to defend once they are down in the river.
Bruh. Why are we still here? Just to suffer? Every night.
There are of course some cop spawns near the bridge assembly as well. Watch out for these spots especially. To defend this area, you should just hide behind anything that gives you at least some bit of cover. Also, I guess, watch out for sniper spawns from the other corner of the map. You could also defend the goats by having 1 or 2 guys in the barn, overlooking the cage assembly. But really, this is a strategy that really only works well for Farmer Miserable. But not for this, because it splits up the team, and reviving each other assuming someone downs like this would be very difficult. I do not recommend doing this idea with the barn. Just stick together at the bridge assembly. I think that's essentially the easiest way to beat it. When you get all goats secured with the help of the pilot, you now have to drive with the car that you had from day 1 to the bridge here at the end of the heist. After all the things you have been going through, this part will be the hardest part of all. When you approach it, get chokers as soon as possible. I highly recommend getting these overkill units that spawn from helicopters. Once you got that, there's only one major spawn you have to focus, that being up here behind the bushes. But by using a sniper with the grey skill, you can clear these spawns pretty easily though. Just watch out for snipers that can spawn in the helicopters. To proceed in this part, you have to open this door. I recommend having a player in the lobby, using a saw or having 3C4 to open it. You can drill it as well, but that tends to take quite a decent amount of time. Once you open the door, it is also an infinite assault immediately, so watch out for that. Pressing the button turns the bridge. This part takes around 90 seconds to complete, but the cops can also disable it, so watch out for that as well. By the way, since some people actually don't know this, you can also jump above this fence by doing one jump in front of it, and then another one followed up instantly. This works pretty much every time. Once the bridge is turned, you can leave and end the heist here. This is all a lot harder than it sounds. However, there is a strategy that can make this a lot easier, but it only really works in solo without any team AI. You see, when you drive the car and stop here at the truck, a trigger is activated that kills all of the cops at the barn where you just left. And then it tells the game to start spawning cops on the bridge. These cops will then move towards you, waiting at this white truck. If you wait 30 seconds here, most of the cops will come here, but only during assault, so watch out for that. It is a lot more difficult to do during a fade, so be sure it is an assault when you try to do this. Now why this only works in solo is simply because you have a small cop spawn cap. In 4 players, this cap is way too high to use this strategy effectively. You might get some cops guided away from the bridge, but there still will be a big amount of cops anyway on the bridge, rendering this strategy pretty much useless with 4 players. However, in solo, or duo as well I guess, most of the cops will come over here to this white truck. It takes around 1.5 minutes for them to come to here, and another 1.5 minutes to come back to the bridge, giving you pretty much a free assault. There still will be some cops on the bridge, but it mainly is just scripted spawns, no big deal. But doing this strategy in 4 players doesn't hurt either. Just don't wait too long. I've actually used this strategy for my Fun and Miserable solo. Go check that video out, I guess, if you want to see how it actually works in-game. It is pretty interesting. Well, I think that's it. I think I talked about everything there is about the Goat Simulator Heist. There is some slight possibility that I missed something out that you might be interested. But for that I have some gameplay that I will link down in the video description for you to watch. I also didn't mention anything about builds. Right here in the background footage, I'm actually showing the build that I used for this entire guide basically. It's my casual anarchist sniper build. It works pretty well, but it's not really friendly or good to use for the new guy playing Death Sentence, because it doesn't have any chokers, it doesn't have Inspire, it doesn't have 9 lives, none of that. It's just poor damage. I mean, it surely works, but like, it's not really an easy build to play. However, I have a build video, that being this one right here, the 5 best Death Sentence 1 Done build video. I will link this in the video description as well for you to watch. None of the builds here are pretty good for Goat Sim as well. I guess just pick the build that you like the most. I'm not really sure what else I could say here. I worked on this guide for quite some time, if you couldn't tell. So I would appreciate if you lads would hit the like button, maybe subscribe as well, I don't know. I would appreciate it a lot. But anyhow, I will see you lads in the next one.